The house smelled like overcooked roast and cheap red wine. I hadn't been back in nearly a year, not since Josh's last memorial. Mom insisted on holding a dinner every year to honor him, but it always felt more like a performance. This year, she wanted it to be just close family. Translation: no outsiders to see the cracks. I parked 2 houses down, stared at the porch light for a full minute before walking up. Greg opened the door before I knocked. "Eli," he said, like he wasn't sure if he should be glad to see me or not. "You made it." I stepped past him, nodded. The living room looked exactly the same as it did when I was 17. Same beige carpet. Same family photos where Josh was always front and center. Mom was in the kitchen, stirring something that didn't need stirring. "You're late," she said without looking up. "Dinner's almost cold." "Traffic," I said. There hadn't been any. We ate in near silence, the sound of utensils scraping plates louder than any conversation. Greg tried small talk. Mom ignored it. My sister Paige didn't show. Smart. I moved my mashed potatoes around while Mom refilled her glass. Third time, maybe fourth. Josh's photo was on the sideboard, grinning in his Letterman jacket like he always got the last word. "Do you ever think about what life would be like if it had been you instead?" she asked suddenly. I looked up. "What?" Her eyes were glassy, the wine talking now. "Or maybe not." "Instead of Josh," she said, swirling her glass. "If it had been you in that car." "Not him." Greg's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Silence. My stomach went cold. "I mean," she laughed softly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "He had so much potential. And you, well, you've always been a little lost." No one said anything. Not Greg, not me. Just the quiet clink of her glass setting down against the wood. I stood up. "Thanks for dinner." Greg opened his mouth to speak, but didn't. I walked out the front door without looking back. She didn't follow me. Of course she didn't. Josh was the kind of kid movies were written about. Quarterback by junior year, full ride to USC, prom king, honor roll, effortlessly magnetic. Teachers adored him. Coaches praised him. Girls followed him around like shadows. At home, he was the star, the blueprint, the golden child. I was something else. Quiet. Bookish. I sketched instead of scoring touchdowns. Wrote stories in notebooks instead of throwing parties. I wasn't shy. Exactly just invisible. Especially to Mom. Carol Morgan made it clear from the beginning who mattered. Josh got a car at 16. I got a lecture about being too expensive. He got applause. I got silence. "You're too sensitive," she'd say when I cried after she snapped at me for asking to hang one of my drawings in the hallway. Josh's trophies lined every shelf in the living room. My art lived in a dusty bin in the garage. Greg tried sometimes. Took me fishing once. Bought me a camera for my 12th birthday. But even he bent to the gravity of Josh's orbit. When Josh walked into a room, people turned. When I walked in, they barely noticed. At school, I learned to keep my head down. Let Josh take the spotlight. He liked it there, and I didn't care enough to fight for it. What would have been the point? I was Eli, Josh's little brother. The weird one. The quiet one. The one who always came second. The only time Josh really paid attention to me was when he needed something: alibis, favors, secrets kept. And I always said yes. Not because I admired him. Because I thought if I helped him, maybe someone would notice me too. Mom only touched my shoulder when guests were around. She'd smile and say, "This is our other son, Eli. He's creative." The pause always made it sound like a flaw. Even when Josh started to slip when he began drinking, getting into fights, missing classes, Mom made excuses. "Boys will be boys. He's under pressure. He'll get it together." When I got a B in algebra, she grounded me for a week. I spent most of my teenage years trying not to be in the way. But now Josh was gone. And somehow, I was still the disappointment. Josh wasn't perfect. Not even close. But no one wanted to hear that, not back then, not now. To them, he was a walking resume. But I knew the other side. The part he kept hidden. The part I helped hide. In sophomore year, he punched a kid named Marcus in the locker room because Marcus accidentally brushed against him, broke the kid's nose. Josh told the principal it was self-defense. I backed him up. Said I saw Marcus swing first. I didn't. Junior year, he started selling pills, Adderall mostly, some Oxy when he got his hands on it. Kept them in his gym bag under his cleats. I found them once and flushed the whole stash. He didn't talk to me for 3 weeks. He cheated on every girlfriend he had. Lied to them like it was a sport. Said it wasn't his fault they got too attached. Once, he got a girl pregnant. Mom wrote a check. The girl transferred schools a week later. Josh had charm, sure, but it was a mask. Underneath was control, manipulation, heat. He liked power, and people handed it to him without question, especially Mom, especially Greg. I kept his secrets because exposing them would have meant setting fire to the only house I'd ever known. It would have made me the enemy. I told myself I was protecting the family. What I was really doing was protecting the illusion. Every lie I told chipped something off me. A little shard at a time. I didn't even notice it until there was hardly anything left. After he died, the stories only got louder. The myth grew. The pedestal got higher. No one asked why Josh was driving that night. No one wanted to know what was in his system. The toxicology report was never mentioned. The crash was just a tragic accident. But I knew. And I said nothing. Not for justice. Not for peace. Just to survive. I didn't answer her calls. Let her voicemails pile up like unread bills. I blocked Greg after the third. Let's not make this worse. Text. There was nothing to fix. Nothing left. 2 weeks after the dinner, I told my boss I needed a few days. Took the train back to the city and shut the door behind me. It was the first time in years I felt like I could breathe. Darren noticed right away. He's been my best friend since college. Graphic designer, tattoos, blunt to a fault. You look like you just walked away from a car crash, he said, tossing me a beer. Close, I replied. I told him everything, the dinner, her words, the silence that followed. He didn't flinch. You going to keep pretending they're a family and not a cult built around your dead brother? I don't know, I said. But I did. He handed me a box. Then start here. Inside were my old journals, sketchbooks, a dusty hard drive I hadn't touched in years. Stuff I left behind when I moved in. I spent the night on the floor of our apartment, surrounded by pieces of my past. I found emails I'd printed from high school, drafts of messages I never sent, photos of Josh drunk and angry, flipping off the camera, arms slung over girls who looked uncomfortable. I remembered every moment, and none of them. Like watching someone else's life. One journal entry from junior year read, I told the truth once. Mom said I was being dramatic. Greg told me to think of Josh's future. I never told the truth again. I stared at the page until my eyes burned. Darren stood behind me. You're not crazy. You were conditioned. What am I supposed to do? He didn't hesitate. Tell the story. All of it. Not for them. For you. Something cracked open in my chest. For once, I didn't want revenge. I wanted to be free. It started with a shoebox in the back of Greg's closet. Darren and I had driven back to my hometown under the excuse of picking up some of my leftover things. Greg wasn't home, he and Carol were at some grief fundraiser. Fitting. I wasn't there to talk anyway. The closet in the study still smelled like his cologne and old carpet glue. I opened a locked drawer with the same key he used for everything. Top drawer, left corner. He never changed. Inside the shoebox were receipts, letters, a check stub with no name, just an account number I didn't recognize. The memo line read, for medical and relocation expenses. There was also a letter, dated my senior year. A girl's name I barely remembered, Rachel S., sophomore, quiet, always wore long sleeves. The letter was from her parents. Formal, legal sounding. It described inappropriate behavior by Josh during a party while our parents were out of town. It didn't say the word, but I knew what it meant. I remembered that night. Josh made me stay in the basement. Said he needed the house to himself. I remembered the yelling after, the slammed door, her crying in the driveway. The letter ended with a demand: counseling, a written apology, and assistance with moving costs. A typed note paperclipped to it said, "Handled. No legal filing. Greg." He knew. My father knew. He didn't confront Josh. He didn't tell Carol. He paid. Quietly. Efficiently. I closed the folder, my hands shaking. This wasn't just about favoritism anymore. This was a conspiracy. The perfect son wasn't just troubled. He was dangerous. And the people who were supposed to protect us all let it happen. Covered it up to protect the myth. I spent the next week combing through bank records, school files, emails, anything I could find. The picture was clear now. Greg wasn't just complicit. He was strategic. I wasn't building a legal case. That would be too clean, too easy to bury. I was building something uglier, something permanent. The truth. It took me 3 days to track her down. Dr. Emily Rosner, child psychologist. Retired now. Used to run a clinic in town. Worked with both Josh and me when we were kids. My mother called it preventive parenting. I remembered it as cold rooms and questions with no safe answers. Her home was small, sunlit, lined with books. She didn't recognize me at first. Then she did. "You're Carol's younger son," she said. "Eli." "Not so young anymore," I replied. She invited me in. Tea. Small talk. Then I told her why I came. Her face tightened when I mentioned Josh. She looked older suddenly. Not just in years. In weight. "I always wondered if you'd come back one day," she said quietly. I showed her a photo from that year. Josh, in his football uniform. Me, with a black eye. She looked away. "There was an incident," she said finally. "At school. Do you remember the library fire drill?" I nodded. Josh had pulled the alarm after getting caught cheating. Blamed it on me. Told the principal I'd done it as a joke. I got suspended. "Your mother insisted I evaluate you for behavioral disorders." Dr. Rosner continued. "She was convinced you had something wrong with you. Said you were always trying to ruin Josh's life." "And did you believe her?" I asked. "I tried to," she said, looking ashamed. "Until I met you. You weren't angry, Eli. You were scared." I let that sit. Let her words burn through me. "She hated me," I said. "Not a question. She feared what you represented," Dr. Rosner replied. "She couldn't accept that Josh might be the problem. It was easier to make you the scapegoat." That continued even after he died. "He was high," I said flatly. "When he crashed." "I know," she said. "So does she. And that was the real reason. Not grief, not loss. Guilt. Josh died because no one held him accountable. And I survived proof of everything they refused to admit. My mother didn't wish I had died instead. She needed me to. Because the living witness is the hardest one to silence. Until now. It was late. I was home from college for winter break, sleeping on the couch because Mom had turned my old room into a shrine. Josh came in loud, stinking of weed and cheap whiskey, muttering about needing my car. "No," I said. "You're wasted." He laughed. "It's my life, Eli. Not yours." We fought. Nothing new. He shoved me. I shoved back. He found my keys on the kitchen counter, walked out without another word. I followed him to the driveway, but I didn't try to stop him. I should have. He peeled out like it was a getaway. I sat on the porch steps in the cold, watching the taillights vanish down the street. 10 minutes later, the sirens started. The crash was just outside of town. Tree split down the middle. My car was unrecognizable. Josh died on impact. I remember the paramedic asking if he had permission to use the vehicle. I nodded, said yes. I told the officer he'd borrowed it, that I was asleep and didn't know he was drunk. The lie felt like swallowing glass, but I told it, over and over. For Mom, for Greg, for the version of the story that made it easier to mourn. They never questioned it, never pulled the toxicology report, never asked why my knuckles were scraped or why I couldn't look anyone in the eye. The town held a vigil. Mom gave a speech. Greg shook hands with the mayor. They printed T-shirts with Josh's jersey number and called him a hero. I stood in the back, cold and invisible, carrying the weight of the truth alone. He stole my car. He was high. He died because no one told him no. And I lied to protect the myth. It's the lie that buried me more than his death ever did. I started small, reached out to Aunt Lorraine on Facebook. She always seemed to know more than she said. Her reply came fast. I always wondered how you stayed sane in that house. Then I called Mr. Paddler, old neighbor. He remembered the time Josh set fire to a mailbox and blamed the neighborhood kid. Your parents paid for the damages, right? He said. Never saw consequences. Next, I emailed Claire. She dated Josh junior year. She replied with a single line. Do you want the whole story or just the clean version? I told her I wanted the truth. It came in waves. Stories I'd half heard. Others I never knew. Josh, bullying kids on the bus, crashing a party, and starting a fight that left someone with a broken jaw. Mom showing up with a check and a threat. Don't ruin our family's name. He was a storm, and they handed him umbrellas. I started compiling everything. Scanned photos, court documents, emails, voicemail backups. Darren helped me organize it, all names redacted where needed. I created a folder on an encrypted drive labeled Echo. Inside, the truth, beginning to end. I uploaded it to a private cloud, set to auto-release if I didn't check in every 72 hours. Then I wrote a blog post, just a draft, just in case. I didn't name names, not yet, but it opened with a single line. My name is Eli Morgan, and my brother is not who you think he was. I read it 3 times before saving it. It wasn't a threat. It was insurance. Not because I was scared of what they'd do, but because I finally understood what I was capable of. The envelope was heavy, off-white, with gold script and a wax seal. I knew what it was before I opened it. Carol never missed a chance to dress Payne in velvet. The first annual Joshua Morgan Memorial Scholarship fundraiser. Black tie. Country club. Guest list. By invitation only. Inside was a smaller card. Handwritten. Carol's cursive. Sharp. And narrow. You'll show up if you care about this family at all. No love. No hope to see you. Just a challenge. I stared at the card for a long time. Darren looked over my shoulder. You going? I nodded once. Yeah. But not how she expects. It wasn't just a fundraiser. It was theater. Carol's final act. To immortalize Josh as a saint. To rewrite history. In sequins. And catered hors d'oeuvre. To make sure no one asked questions, because who questions a grieving mother in pearls? She didn't want me there to honor him. She wanted me there to behave. To smile, nod, validate the fiction. But I'd played that role long enough. This time I wasn't bringing flowers. I was bringing the truth. I met Monica Klein in a diner 2 towns over. She used to write for the local paper before moving to a national outlet. Investigative work, political corruption, financial fraud. She had a sharp eye and a sharper memory. You sure you want to do this? She asked, after I slid a folder across the table. I've never been more sure, I said. She skimmed the documents, paused at the check stub to Rachel S. They'll try to bury you for this. I already buried myself for them, I replied. We made an agreement. If anything went wrong at the event, if I was silenced, removed, or just didn't check in, she would publish everything. names, dates, audio, photos. It would go live on 3 platforms and hit inboxes of donors, alumni, and local media. Fail-safes, layers, redundancies. That night, I bought a hidden lapel mic. Tested it twice. Clear signal. Darren helped me edit a video clips of Josh at his worst. Testimonies from people he'd hurt. Snippets of Carol's coldest moments. Her fundraiser speech from last year where she called me Josh's quiet little shadow made the final cut. I uploaded the final edit to a flash drive and a cloud link. Titled it The Real Legacy. I didn't want revenge. I wanted exposure. I wanted every mask off. And if they still wanted to throw a spotlight on Josh Morgan, I'd make sure the truth was standing in it. The ballroom smelled like perfume, polished wood, and denial. Crystal chandeliers. Waiters in white gloves. A string quartet played near the stage, while people mingled with champagne and practiced sympathy in whispers. I wore a black suit. No tie. Darren stood near the back. Camera bag slung over his shoulder. Monica wasn't far. No one knew her face here. She liked it that way. Carol floated through the room like a widow in a storybook. Diamond brooch. Painted on grief. She hugged people who didn't deserve hugs and thanked them for keeping Josh's memory alive. Greg stood near the bar, nursing a scotch in a quiet vacancy. He hadn't looked me in the eye all night. When it was time, the lights dimmed. Carol stepped onto the stage. She began her speech, the way she always did, with a soft laugh and a rehearsed crack in her voice. She talked about Josh's smile, his leadership, how he never gave up on anyone. I kept my eyes on her face. She didn't falter once. Not when she said he was a role model. Not when she called him a protector. Not when she gestured to the scholarship banner like it was a gravestone chiseled with truth. And now, she said, her voice catching just enough to seem real, his brother Eli would like to say a few words. A polite ripple of applause. I stepped up to the podium, looked at her, then the crowd. They were waiting for tears. I gave them silence. My brother died 4 years ago, I began. Since then, I've been told countless times what a loss it was. What a tragedy. What a light the world lost. I paused. The mic caught the breath I didn't take. But what if the loss isn't what you think it is? What if the tragedy wasn't just the crash, but everything that led up to it and everything that was buried after? Murmurs. A few confused glances. I leaned into the mic, calm as steel. You came for a toast to the dead, but I'm not here to raise a glass. I stepped aside and hit play. The screen flickered to life. The opening was quiet, just Josh, grinning on the football field. Laughter. A montage of the golden boy. Then the shift. A bruised girl's voice, audio only. He told me I couldn't tell anyone. That no one would believe me. And he was right. Josh's mugshot from a DUI that never made the local paper. His slurred voicemail threatening a teammate. Photos of bruises. Screenshots of texts. Dates. Names. Gasps. One woman stood. Another clutched her pearls like the lies were physically cracking in her hands. Then came the documents. The check Greg wrote to Rachel's family. The letter from her attorney. The note scrawled in Greg's handwriting. Handled. No legal filing. The camera cut to Carol at last year's memorial, calling me Eli the quiet one, always so different. Then came the audio. Her voice. Slurred from wine. Sharp as a blade. I wish it had been you instead of Josh. The room went still. I watched Carol, her face frozen somewhere between horror and calculation. She looked to Greg, but he wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me. The video ended with a black screen. White text. The truth isn't always pretty, but it's still the truth. No applause. No movement. Just the sound of a glass tipping somewhere and shattering on the floor. I stepped back to the mic. This is the legacy you've been funding. Not a scholarship. A cover-up. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just let it breathe. You've built a monument to someone who spent his life destroying people he thought wouldn't fight back. I was one of them. Not anymore. A man in the front row stood and left. A woman followed, shaking her head. Carol didn't move. Couldn't. Darren stepped forward, camera still running. I walked off the stage, past the stunned faces and the ruined illusion. For the first time in my life, I wasn't standing in Josh's shadow. I was standing in the truth. It unraveled fast. The silence broke like glass first. A cough, then a raised voice. "Is this true?" Someone demanded near the stage. Carol didn't answer. She just sat, back rigid, eyes staring at nothing. The chair beneath her might as well have been a witness stand. Greg stood abruptly, knocking over his drink. He didn't look at me as he stormed out. The doors swung shut behind him, a final punctuation mark. A man in a navy suit approached Carol. "I donated $25,000. You let me name my son after yours." Another voice chimed in. "My daughter was one of his classmates did. You know what he did to her?" Carol opened her mouth, but no words came. She reached for her wine glass with shaking hands, missed it, and folded into the chair like a deflated balloon. A woman near the back crossed herself. Another wept silently, unsure if it was grief or betrayal. I stood at the edge of it all, watching it burn. Not with satisfaction, not with vengeance, with detachment, like I was watching someone else's house collapse. One I'd spent years locked inside. Darren stepped beside me, camera down now. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. We walked out slowly, past stunned donors and furious whispers. No one tried to stop us. No one called my name. Outside, the air was cold and clean. I took a deep breath for the first time all night. Behind me, the lie was collapsing. And I didn't look back. By morning, the video had over 200 views. By afternoon, it was on 2 local news stations. By the end of the week, it had hit national syndication. Carol and Greg released a statement through their attorney. "We are deeply saddened by the distortion of past events and request privacy during this difficult time." Translation: we got caught. The scholarship fund was frozen. Donors backed out. The board of the country club reconsidered the Morgans' membership. No one said it publicly, but their names became quiet poison in every social circle they used to dominate. I didn't feel joy. I felt relief. I hadn't destroyed them. I'd removed their mask. The damage was theirs. I just turned on the lights. I started therapy the following week. The first session, I talked about silence, how it wraps around you until you forget what it feels like to be heard. The therapist asked what I wanted to work toward. "Peace," I said. "Not forgiveness, just peace." At night, I wrote. Started outlining a memoir. Not about Josh, not exactly. About survival, emotional neglect, what it means to grow up loved on paper but starved in practice. I titled it The Other Son. The words didn't pour out. They bled, but they were mine. And for once, that was enough. A year later, I barely recognized the person who walked into that ballroom. The photo gallery opened last spring, small space. High ceilings, tucked between a bookstore and a bike shop on the east side. We called it Perspective. Some of the photos are mine, but most are from kids I mentor now. At-risk youth, like they're called on paper. Mostly just kids like me, quiet, overlooked, waiting for someone to say they matter. They don't ask about Josh. Most of them don't know I had a brother at all. They know me for what I show them. Composition, light, framing, how to turn pain into art, how to own the story before someone else writes it for you. Some days, Darren helps out with workshops. Monica drops by with updates, another story she's digging into, another system cracking open. The world hasn't gotten less corrupt. But I've learned how to stand inside it without becoming part of it. Carol and Greg never reached out again. I didn't expect them to. Their silence is finally honest. The blog post is still online. So is the video. Sometimes it resurfaces on social media. Another comment thread. Another person saying, "I wish I had your courage." I don't answer those messages. Because it wasn't courage. It was necessity. This morning, I opened a letter. No return address. Handwritten. My name is Elena. I was 16 when Josh hurt me. No one believed me. Not even my parents. I thought I'd carry that silence forever. Then I saw your video. You gave me a voice. Thank you. I read it twice. Then set it on the gallery's front desk, under a small stone paperweight shaped like a camera. Outside, the street was glowing in late afternoon light. Kids walked by laughing. Somewhere down the block, a musician played a worn-out guitar. I stood in the doorway and watched the light shift across the pavement. Not once did I think about what Josh would say if he were here. Because for the first time, I'm not living in my brother's shadow. I'm living in my own light. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.